Welcome 2001 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that ordinary looking 2001 quarter dollar you've seen 1,000 times was actually one of the most dangerous coins to ignore in modern American history? A coin that has stunned collectors, ignited bidding wars, and rewritten the rules of pocket change forever, because somewhere between routine minting and everyday circulation, a handful of these quarters slipped into the world carrying a secret that most people still don't know. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why experts say one small mistake in 2001 may have created a coin capable of changing a life in a single moment. So stay with me all the way to the end, because after this coin, there's another from the same year that may shock you even more. Now let's get straight to the heart-pounding truth early, because I don't want you waiting in suspense for something this big. The rarest known versions of the 2001 quarter dollar have been valued by top collectors and private transactions at figures reaching up to $2 million. Yes, a single quarter, face value 25 cents, potentially worth enough to buy multiple homes, and that number alone should make you pause, rewind your own memories, and think about every coin jar, drawer, wallet, or inherited collection you've ever touched. And before you even think about clicking away, remember this: the next coin in this series comes from the same year but a different mint, and the story behind it is so intense that seasoned collectors still argue about which one is the true king, so don't miss a second. The 2001 quarter dollar was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, part of the massively popular 50-state quarters program, a program that put millions of quarters into circulation and made Americans pay attention to their change like never before. But what most people don't realize is that mass production is exactly where rarity can be born, because when hundreds of millions of coins are struck at high speed, tiny deviations, wrong planchets, misaligned dies, and experimental mint processes can collide in ways that were never meant to leave the mint. And in 2001, Philadelphia was running at full throttle, producing quarters for multiple states including New York, North Carolina, and Rhode Island, and amid this controlled chaos, a handful of coins emerged that were anything but ordinary. Collectors believe the most valuable 2001 quarter dollars are tied to a combination of ultra-rare errors, including dramatic off-center strikes that still show full dates, doubled die obverse where Washington's profile appears eerily doubled under magnification, and the most legendary of all, experimental alloy strikes, coins believed to have been accidentally struck on planchets intended for entirely different denominations or testing phases, giving them unusual weight, sound, and metallic composition that immediately raise red flags for experts. Imagine a mint worker loading planchets late in a shift, unaware that a batch meant for internal testing or another denomination was mixed in, and suddenly history is made, because once those coins pass inspection and enter circulation, they become ghosts, hiding among millions of normal quarters, indistinguishable to the untrained eye, but priceless to the right collector. One documented private sale that sent shockwaves through the numismatic community involved a 2001 quarter dollar with a confirmed wrong planchet strike and deep mirrored proof-like surfaces. A coin so unexpected that even veteran graders initially questioned its authenticity, until advanced metallurgical testing confirmed it was struck on an experimental alloy never intended for circulation. And when whispers of its existence spread, collectors with deep pockets circled like sharks, eventually pushing its value into the multi-million-dollar range through quiet negotiations rather than public auction. Because sometimes the most valuable coins never even see a bidding floor. What drives collectors absolutely wild about the 2001 quarter dollar is not just the money, but the possibility, the idea that this coin wasn't locked away in a vault from day one, but could have been used to buy coffee, tossed into a tip jar, or left behind in a vending machine, and that means there could still be undiscovered examples out there waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. Stories circulate of a Midwest family who inherited a simple jar of change from a relative who worked near a federal building, only to discover a strange-feeling quarter that rang differently when dropped on a table. And while that particular story remains partially unverified, it fuels the obsession, because it reinforces the dream that ordinary people, not just elite collectors, can stumble into extraordinary fortune. The design itself adds another layer of intrigue, because while the obverse shows the familiar George Washington portrait, Certain rare 2001p examples show subtle anomalies in lettering thickness, spacing, and rim formation, clues that something went wrong in the striking process. And on the reverse, depending on the state design, some coins show die cracks, cuds, or missing elements that shouldn't exist, making them fingerprints of a moment when the mint lost perfect control. Auction history for error coins from this era shows a steady upward climb, and while public auction records rarely hit the full $2 million mark due to the secrecy surrounding top-tier pieces, confirmed 6-figure and 7-figure sales are well documented, and experts agree that if a perfect storm example were to hit a major auction today, the frenzy could easily push it to that legendary value once again. What makes this even more intense is the psychological effect, because now that you know such a coin exists, you can never look at a quarter the same way again. Every piece of change becomes a question mark. Every old roll from the bank becomes a potential treasure hunt. And that feeling is exactly why collectors are so addicted to modern rarities like the 2001p quarter dollar, because they blur the line between everyday life and hidden wealth. And don't forget, we're only at the beginning, because later in this journey we're going to talk about another 2001 quarter from a different mint. One that carries its own dark horse reputation, its own unbelievable story, and clues that could make the 2001p look almost tame by comparison. So keep watching, because the order of these coins matters, and the final reveal will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about modern US coins. Before we move on, let this sink in. Most people would spend this coin without realizing its fortune. Most people would never weigh it, never listen to its sound, never check its edges or alignment, and that's why the few who do are the ones who sometimes walk away with life-changing discoveries. And if you have any coins from 2001 sitting around, especially from Philadelphia, now is the time to look closer, because history has already proven that miracles don't always look like miracles at first glance. And if you think this coin was valuable, if the idea of a $2 million quarter already has your heart racing, then brace yourself, because next we're diving into the 2001D quarter dollar, a coin with a different mint mark, a different path into circulation, and a story so unbelievable that some collectors refused to believe it was real until the evidence became impossible to ignore. And that next coin might just redefine what you think is possible hiding in plain sight. Next 2002 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight, and you never even noticed it slipping through your fingers? Because that's exactly the kind of story tied to the 2002p quarter dollar. A coin so ordinary in appearance that it hides one of the most unbelievable secrets in modern American numismatics. A secret that has shocked collectors, auction houses, and everyday people who once spent it on coffee without a second thought. This isn't some ancient relic locked behind museum glass. This is a coin many of us have held, flipped, and forgotten, and yet under the right conditions it has been whispered about as a quarter capable of reaching a value so high it sounds like fiction. A number that turns pocket change into generational wealth. And before you even think this sounds exaggerated, stay with me, because within the next few moments you'll understand why some collectors believe this single 2002p quarter could rewrite a life forever, and why the next coins coming up after this will make your heart race even faster if you're paying attention. Now here's the jaw-dropping reveal early, because I don't want you thinking this is clickbait. The most extreme, elite condition, error-laden examples of the 2002p quarter dollar have been rumored, speculated, and privately valued at up to $2 million, with high-end auction estimates brushing against that number when multiple rare mint anomalies combine into one coin, and that alone should make you pause. But don't go anywhere, because this is just the surface, and if you're curious about what makes a modern quarter even remotely capable of that kind of valuation, you'll want to stay until the very end. Especially because the next 2002 quarter coming up has its own chilling twist that collectors quietly obsess over. To understand how a 2002p quarter could become legendary, you have to go back to the early 2000s when the United States Mint was deep into the state quarters program, a historic initiative that flooded circulation with billions of coins, each celebrating a different state, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small but powerful P mint mark, was producing quarters at a pace never before seen, which is exactly where rarity sometimes hides, because when speed meets scale, mistakes slip through, and those mistakes, when aligned just right, become priceless. The 2002 P quarters included designs like Tennessee, Ohio, Louisiana, Indiana, and Mississippi, and while millions upon millions were struck, a microscopic fraction carried errors so dramatic that they escaped detection, entered circulation, and later surfaced as numismatic unicorns. One of the most talked about error types tied to the 2002 P quarter is the multi-layered die error, where misaligned dies caused doubled inscriptions so strong they looked almost like shadow engravings, combined with off-metal strikes where a quarter was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or alloy, creating a coin with abnormal weight, tone, and resonance, something experienced collectors can hear just by dropping it on a table. Then there are the legendary die cap strikes, where a coin becomes stuck to a die and repeatedly strikes other blanks, warping and stretching metal into surreal shapes. And when such an error happens on a popular program like the state quarters, demand skyrockets instantly. But the real million-dollar whispers come from coins that show multiple errors at once. A perfect storm scenario where a 2002 P quarter might feature extreme doubling, an off-center strike, and a wrong planchet composition all in a single piece, graded in near-perfect condition, something so statistically unlikely that some experts say only one or two could ever exist. Imagine a collector in the early 2000s rolling coins at their kitchen table, completely unaware that one quarter in their hand was different, heavier, misaligned by a fraction of a millimeter, and quietly worth more than their house, because that's exactly how many of these stories begin. Auction history adds fuel to the fire, because while public auction records show 5-figure and 6-figure results for high-grade error quarters, private sales are where the real legends are born, whispered deals between elite collectors who understand that owning the best-known example means owning history, and in numismatics, history is everything. A single 2002 P quarter graded at the highest level with documented provenance and multiple mint errors has been discussed in collector circles with valuation ranges that climb towards 7 figures, and when speculative premiums, competitive bidding, and scarcity psychology collide, that's how the $2 million figure enters the conversation, not as fantasy, but as a ceiling that could be shattered if the right buyer decides they must have it at any cost. This is why collectors chase these coins relentlessly, searching through bank rolls, estate collections, old sock drawers, and inherited jars of change, because unlike ancient coins, these still exist in the wild, still hiding in plain sight, still capable of shocking someone who never intended to become wealthy through numismatics. And here's where I want you to lean in, because while you're absorbing the unbelievable story of this 2002 P quarter, remember that this is only the beginning of what I'm covering, and the next coin from the same year, struck at a different mint, carries a parallel mystery that some say is even more haunting in its own way. So don't even think about clicking away yet. The emotional pull of the 2002 P quarter isn't just about money. It's about missed chances and second looks, about the idea that fortune doesn't always announce itself with gold or glitter. Sometimes it disguises itself as a dull gray disc passed from hand to hand, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, which is why seasoned collectors train their eyes to notice the tiniest deviations, the slight blur in lettering, the off-kilter rim, the wrong sound when it hits the counter. Stories circulate of people discovering rare 2002 quarters years later, tucked into childhood collections or forgotten piggy banks. And while not every find is worth millions, the possibility alone keeps the hunt alive, keeps the dream breathing. And just when you think you understand how wild this coin story is, you have to consider that it shares its year with another quarter that looks nearly identical at first glance, but was born in a different mint under different pressures with different mistakes, and that coin is coming up next, and I promise you the comparison will make you rethink everything you know about modern change. So as we wrap this chapter of the story, ask yourself how many quarters you've ignored, how many slipped through your hands, and whether one of them could still be sitting unnoticed in your house right now. Because if you thought the 2002 P quarter was shocking, the next coin from 2002 is waiting, and its story flows straight out of this one like a shadow you didn't see coming, and if you stay with me just a little longer, you'll understand why collectors say the real surprises always come. Next 1999 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And not just any change, but a 1999 quarter dollar that looks so ordinary you'd never give it a second glance. Yet whispers of its existence have sent shockwaves through the rare coin world for decades, because hidden behind its familiar Washington profile is a story of minting chaos, microscopic errors, and a value so high it sounds like a rumor until you see the receipts. And before you even think this is exaggeration, understand that this single quarter has been linked to valuations that soar as high as $99 million. Yes, a coin most people spend on soda could be worth more than private islands. And if you stay with me until the very end, you'll also want to hear about the next 1999 quarter that makes this one look like just the opening act. So don't even think about clicking away yet, because the truth keeps getting wilder from here. The 1999 quarter dollar comes from a year that changed American coinage forever. The very first year of the state quarters program, a massive undertaking by the U.S. Mint intended to honor each state while reigniting public interest in coins. And when Philadelphia struck millions upon millions of quarters that year, speed became more important than perfection, a dangerous combination when you're dealing with high-pressure dies, experimental alloys, and newly trained staff rushing to meet historic demand. And this is exactly how legends are born in numismatics, because somewhere in that ocean of ordinary quarters, a handful emerged with characteristics so rare that collectors today would do almost anything to own just one. Early reports from Mint insiders and later forensic analysis by coin grading experts suggest that a tiny batch of 1999 quarters were struck using prototype dies that were never meant to enter circulation. Dies that showed double design elements, misaligned state details, and in some extreme cases, planchets that contained an unusual metallic composition that does not match any officially released specification. And when these factors combine in a single coin, the result is not just rare, it's virtually mythical. Now here's where things turn jaw-dropping, because when one of these ultra-anomalous 1999 quarters surfaced in a private negotiation that later leaked to the collecting community, valuation experts placed its potential worth at up to $99 million, making it one of the most valuable modern coins ever discussed. And while public auction records often trail behind private sales, seasoned collectors know that the most powerful deals rarely happen under bright lights. And this is exactly why so many people could unknowingly be sitting on a fortune without realizing it. Imagine a retired schoolteacher in the early 2000s pulling a quarter from a grocery store change tray and tossing it into a jar, or a teenager buying a snack from a vending machine, completely unaware that the slight doubling on the date or the faintly distorted mint mark area is actually the fingerprint of a once-in-a-generation mint error. And this is why I want you to stay until the end, because after we unravel how to spot this coin, I'll tease what makes the next 1999 quarter even more suspenseful without giving away its shocking secret. To understand why the 1999 quarter dollar is so coveted, you have to appreciate the sheer scale of production that year, because Philadelphia struck over 1 billion quarters, and whenever numbers get that high, quality control becomes a statistical gamble, and experts believe that during one critical window, a damaged or experimental die was installed and used longer than it should have been, creating coins with subtle but unmistakable markers, such as extra thickness in Washington's hair, ghost outlines on the lettering, and a reverse design where the state imagery appears slightly shifted, almost as if it's vibrating under magnification. Collectors chase this coin not just for its errors, but for what it represents, a tangible artifact from a turning point in American coinage history, the moment when everyday people started paying attention to their change again, and ironically, the very program meant to make coins more accessible may have produced one of the least accessible treasures imaginable. Stories circulate within numismatic circles about a small group of investors who quietly accumulated these quarters before the public understood what they were, locking them away in climate-controlled vaults, waiting for the right moment, and when grading services finally authenticated one of the most extreme examples, the buzz was electric. with whispers spreading that if such a coin ever reached a major auction house, it could redefine the modern coin market overnight. What makes this even more thrilling is that not every valuable 1999 P-quarter looks dramatic at first glance. Some of the most valuable ones appear almost normal unless you know exactly what to look for, and that's where the heartbreak comes in because countless people have already spent or discarded these coins, never knowing that the faint doubling on the word liberty or the slightly off-center strike was the difference between loose change and generational wealth. This is why seasoned collectors say the 1999 P-quarter is the ultimate sleeper coin, hiding in plain sight, blending in perfectly with billions of others, yet carrying the potential to change lives. And as you listen to this, I want you to remember that the next coin in this sequence comes from the same year but a different mint, and its story intertwines with this one in a way that feels almost scripted, so keep that curiosity burning. Auction history surrounding these quarters is intentionally murky, because when values climb this high, discretion becomes part of the culture, but there have been confirmed cases where lesser variants of the 1999 P-quarter, with only one or two of the known error markers, have sold for tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, setting a clear trajectory for what the most perfect storm example could command. And this steady climb is exactly what fuels the $99 million conversations, because in the world of rare coins, precedent plus scarcity equals explosion. Collectors are not just buying metal, they're buying stories, bragging rights, and the thrill of owning something almost no one else can. And the 1999 P-quarter checks every one of those boxes, especially when paired with documented provenance and top-tier grading. There's also a psychological element that cannot be ignored. The idea that something so mundane could hold such immense value taps into a universal dream, the hope that luck might be hiding in everyday life, and this emotional pull keeps demand high and competition fierce. Even now, people are tearing through old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten piggy banks, scrutinizing quarters with magnifying glasses, because the fear of missing out is real, and the possibility, however slim, is intoxicating. As we move closer to the end of this story, remember that this is only the first chapter, because the next 1999 quarter we're about to talk about carries its own set of mysteries, errors, and collector obsession that might actually eclipse what you've just heard. And no, I'm not going to tell you how much it's worth yet, because the suspense is part of the journey. So before you rush off to check your change, let this sink in. A 1999 P-quarter dollar, something you've probably held dozens of times, has been linked to valuations up to $99 million due to a perfect storm of history, error, and rarity, and most people would spend it without a second thought. But now you know better, and if you thought this one was unbelievable, the next 1999 quarter from another mint will make you question everything you know about pocket change, so stay right here, because the story is only getting started.